and welcome to Epiphytic Cacti. Today I figured we would take a look at some seedling stuff. In the past I had done a fertilizer experiment video, and then I ended up doing a repotting video for the seedlings. I basically potted them up from being all clustered together in what I think was a 3-inch pot to then being separated and planted in their very own 5-inch pots. And as it had turned out, when I gave those seedlings room to grow, they definitely grew. So I figured we would kind of take a look at different stages of seedlings. And then we can look at some of the seedlings in these bottles, because these bottled seedlings, I found something really strange and interesting in there. So this is one of the seedlings where I had basically ended up giving them room to grow. And you can see it's got all this wonderful little growth here, and it's got a lot of new growth coming out kind of all over the place. So sometimes when it comes down to it and you have seedlings and you're really trying to cull those seedlings, it's generally seedlings that are a little bit more like this one that I would try to keep, because it is a very strong grower. You can see how much it's growing. The branches on this are not humongous as of yet. I know what the mother plant is for this, but I don't know what the father plant for this is. The mother plant for this is Stern von Erlau. That particular plant has had considerable use in hybridizing. There is something unique and interesting about that plant in terms of producing unique and interesting hybrids. So this one was planted on 9/12/2018, so September 12th of 2018. So this seedling is about 3 years and 4 months old. So that's what it looks like after that amount of time. Again, this is a much stronger growing seedling than a lot of the other ones would have been, because when I called these seedlings, I called out the ones that were not growing as strongly. So most of the seedlings that I'm going to have in these pots like this, they were already going to be the more exceptional growing seedlings. So if we look at another one, and one of the reasons why I want to show differences here, it's really because the difference is in the growth of the seedlings. So here is another seedling, and you can see this one definitely looks a lot more like, your Disocactus hybrid, or, what most people call epiphyllum hybrids. Now this one, I don't know the father, because most of these were kind of an experiment. I just bought a bunch of plants and I was like, we're going to figure out what's going on here and plant some seeds. So this one, it was also 3 years and 4 months old. This one's mother plant was Pegasus. Pegasus is an exceptional grower, and it definitely looks like this one kind of inherited that exceptional growing trait. You can see it's got both growth that is hanging down and growth that is growing more upright. So that's a little bit interesting. You can see the new growth that's coming here. It seems to be very reminiscent of Pegasus to me, except for the branch shape on these branches that are hanging down is very different. But you can see just how much different that one is compared to the first one that we looked at. Here we have another one, and this one is kind of a weird monster, really. So definitely not what I would call a compact plant. This one has both triangular and flat growth, but it looks like the predominant growth pattern for this I guess it has equal, considering the newer branches are coming out flat. And this one is also Pegasus. And this one was planted at a little bit of a different time. This one was planted earlier. So this one was planted on August 29th, 2018. So this one is a few months older than the other ones by about 3 months. So this one is about 3 years and 7 months old. So there you go. Again, it just has this really, really large growth, really kind of epic growth. You can see the new branches that are coming into spring there. It's got these lovely new branches, so really beautiful. And I would expect that there is the potential, you cannot say for sure, because honestly, this is kind of a crazy mixture of genetics that you have going on by the time that you've hybridized out to this point. Like Pegasus would have been hybridized from this and that, and those would have been hybridized from this and that. And so this is just a soup of genetics that's going on here. Just like for human beings, you kind of never know what you're going to get. There's the potential that they could bloom next year, but in all honesty, sometimes hybrids may never really bloom. Sometimes they may take a decade to bloom. So the general rule of thumb that they kind of tell you is, well, you know, maybe about 5 years until it blooms. Here's the kind of tricksy thing about that is that you might bloom after 5 years, but just because it blooms doesn't necessarily mean that that's the bloom that it's going to remain forever. First time blooms on these types of, on hybrids like this, they might be wildly different than the next season's bloom. Generally, you don't register them in their first season bloom. If you are going to try to name and register them with the Epiphytic Society of America, you are going to be waiting for about 3 blooming seasons, meaning the plant should have bloomed in 3 consecutive seasons to confirm that the bloom is stable and that is what its appearance will be. Because the first season to the second season to the third season, it could be wildly different. But whatever that third season bloom is probably the stable bloom. I have read hybridizers saying that they take cuttings of their own plants to make certain that they root. So some hybridizers will not register a plant if it does not root, or if it does not root easily. And there are hybrids out there that are really, really, really hard to root. It is just something in their genetics. They're very slow to produce roots. Then here we have a seedling planted in the next season. So this is a seedling that was planted in the fall of 2019, late fall of 2019. And you can see for comparison, you know, again, this is a better growing seedling. I planted them in 2019. And then about a year later, I would have called them out and planted the strongest growing ones in pots this size. And the pot is one of these little black nursery pots here. So I think that that's a 2.5 inch pot. Maybe it's a 3 inch pot. So it's just planted by themselves. And I have several that are like this. And again, some grow really well, some don't grow really well. This is Meadowlark crossed with Christian Pates. This is just some weird experimental thing. There isn't anything special about why I chose those. Like now, as I go into it now I'm being very particular about who I choose for hybridizing and kind of why I choose them for hybridizing. So in these bottles that I have here, it really looks like deep winter here. So it looks like end of December, beginning of February, I was sort of planting seeds. And so this right here is Bifera monacanthum. So I planted some seeds that I had harvested off of that. So here we go. We have these bottles. And again, you know, these are in kind of a deep winter of 2020. So really this gets kind of interesting because most of these are pretty green, but sometimes you see the color on some of these little seedlings versus seedlings that are like this where there's not a lot of color. They're just straight green. And this is a really interesting thing because it would appear as though, this is fascinating. Here is a set where you can see that the seedlings are a reddish color from being exposed to the light. So you can see just how strongly red those seedlings are. And that's really interesting. Just to note that they have that kind of behavior, even from seedling stage. And this one here looks like it is Falling in Love crossed with some crazy sauce. These seeds were given to me, so I do have Falling in Love, but it's never bloomed for me yet. So in any case, yeah, some of these are mine and some of them were sent to me, like Tassel crossed with Shimmer that was sent to me. It's interesting to me that these seeds are green, given that I think that Shimmer has kind of overpowering genetics. So that's kind of interesting. Not all seedlings do all that well. See this? It's kind of a sad state of affairs going on in there. This one is my cross. This is Professor Ebert crossed with Sierra Thompson. Here is a different group of Professor Ebert crossed with Sierra Thompson. Again, January 26, 2020 is when I planted these. I mean, you can see the difference just between these two, you know. Did they come from the same seed pod? No, they did not come from the same seed pod. How I know is I mark the seed pods like this, so I'll give them like a group or some kind of alphabetical thing to make sure that I understand the difference. So this was a G3. So that was its own seed pod. Meanwhile, this was G1 and it was a different seed pod. Now I did this cross both ways, but unfortunately none of the seeds from Sierra Thompson were viable. Did produce fruits, but the seeds ended up not being viable for some reason. So here's another one, and this one is also group 3. So even just within the groups, this was group 3 and this was group 3, you can see that there is, a marked difference. And it may have been that this might have gotten some mold in there or something, suffered from some blight and sort of killed off those seedlings. And even when they're this young, you can definitely see the difference in the fruits, that there is a marked difference between what was going on inside of those fruits, even though they're crossed from the same plants. Here we have, again, not really my cross, but it's a pretty little group of seedlings. So here's one that didn't do all that well. Again, not really my cross, but you can see the germination rate was either really low or it suffered from some kind of blight. Now here's one that looks like it did a little too well. So that's gonna be a mess to separate. Probably shouldn't have let this go quite this long. It's coming out of the top of the bottle and these definitely need to be separated. This one here is cool because you can see it's like starting to get its flat growth, so it's starting to get its true clades instead of these little baby seedling clades. This is my cross. This is Rampage crossed with Jalisco Starlight. I think Jalisco Starlight is a wonderful, wonderful plant. And Rampage there's something I like about Rampage, its growth. I think it's got this kind of unusual pale green growth, but it grows really beautifully. I don't have the plant anymore. I gave it away. Here's an interesting one too. So this one has this little flat, another little flat seedling, and there's not a lot of seedlings in there, but this was interesting to me because this was a self-pollination. So I wanted to grow these to see what exactly happens when one of these hybrids self-pollinates. I don't really know because I just don't really know. So I thought that was kind of fascinating. So I wanted to pot those up. So the thing that really prompted me to even film this video was because I was downstairs and I was monkeying around with all of the plants, which I do. And I looked at these and I decided that they needed water. So I decided to water them. And when I decided to water them, I stumbled across this. This is one of my crosses, and this is December 28th, 2019. And this is Felchino Favorite crossed with Chameleon. And when I looked in this bottle, I think my heart kind of went pitter-patter a little bit, because what I see in here is a very strange set of growth for seedlings. See how different this growth looks? First, this growth looks like it is considerably more mature at a much smaller kind of size. So I wanted to open this bottle and play with these and see what these seedlings they look like. I mean, look at how weird, and look at the crazy branching that's happening. And so the reason why I think this is so cool is because what I see when I look inside of this bottle is a very strong throwback to what would be Disocactus species growth. So I'm kind of curious about this. And Felchino Favorite definitely has very strong Disocactus species lineage, and it has very strong Disocactus-like growth. Chameleon, not so much. Chameleon has some of the most beautiful branches on any hybrid I've ever seen. It's got these long, beautiful, wavy kind of branches. And both of these are prolific bloomers. So I was so excited to see how crazy these are. So I figured I would open up this bottle and we could kind of separate and plant these guys. And now here we have a bed of seedlings. It looks like, Felchino Filou. It looks like I've got some Summer Fairy and Beauty Wagner, but it looks like, look at that, I only have one seedling that sprouted from that. And there you see I've got like a big cluster of Felchino Filou, and then I've got like some Felchino Fairy happening here. And then there's more Felchino Fairy, and I don't know what this is crossed with, because I think this is what happened when the hummingbirds kind of went to town on those Felchino hybrids. The hummingbirds really like the Felchino hybrids, and they just will go to town on them. And more Felchino Fairy, and it looks like all 4 of these are Felchino Fairy. Very interesting, and here you can also see how red this one seedling is. versus how some of the other seedlings are green. So again, this is something that is just from a young age. You can see I'm getting a little flat growth here. So that's really interesting. And, you know, once again, these were planted on November 22nd of 2020. Gives you an idea of what you can expect with seedlings. You know, these don't even really need to be separated at this point because really look at them. The only downside to these is they are planted still in a seedling mixture. Here, we'll start it with a knife. I have a very accident prone. So there we go, starting that with a knife, and then I can just put the scissor in here and very slowly kind of cut around here. You can see there's some, my dog, there's some groovy moss that's growing in here that I think is kind of neat. Digging the moss. Oof. Kind of want to put that moss in one of those terrariums. I just watered these guys. Look at how cool that moss is. Man, look at how cool those little seedlings are. Look at how crazy they are. All right, so I'm gonna keep that just so I don't lose the label. Here we can see, I mean, look at how neat. Oh my God, I am so excited about the state of these seedlings. So I'm gonna just try to work this out of here because the seedlings have to be separated. There we go. So just pop that out of there. And then what you will see is this moss is really gonna be holding this together. So then I can just kind of separate these, and what I'm gonna do is just pull those seedlings away from the moss and put that moss there. I wonder what exactly this is, this plant. That's this little mossy plant. It's cool. All right, and we'll go like this. And you just wanna be gentle, you know, and kind of tease those apart. I will be honest with you that epiphytic cacti, these guys, and seedlings like this, they are a whole lot tougher than you think they are. They seem like they're, you know, a lot of times it's like, it seems like, well, they're seedlings and they're so delicate, but that's not totally true here. So what's really interesting is you can see this is just one seedling. And this is what I was seeing when I looked in here that got me so excited, is look at the growth. The way that it's growing is so very Disocactus-y. So I'm gonna tease maybe a little bit more of this original growth. And you can see how tiny the roots are. You know, obviously this seedling is a very strong seedling for this group. So obviously that is definitely a keeper. Here is another one that is a very strong seedling. And man, that seedling is cool looking. That is a very cool looking seedling. So here is another seedling. Look at how great that is. It's just fantastic. You know what? I actually didn't realize that. Oh my God, and there's a third seedling. There are only 3 seedlings in here, which means the way that all of these are growing so cool, I don't have to call these at all. So I'm not gonna call these. I'm just gonna keep all 3 of them. I didn't realize there were only 3 of them. So here we go. This is one of the perks of buying so many plants, is that I end up with so many of these little pots here that are amazing for seedlings. And, you know, it's kind of rough with the plastic. So this is kind of a trick here because this is dry media. I'm gonna put water in this so that it's not quite so dusty. So it's not kicking dust up in my face. I don't really like the dust from the potting media at all. And it's not good to breathe in. So you should wear a mask when you deal with it, but a really good trick to keep that dust level down is to wet the media. All right, so there we go. I'm gonna just go like this. There we go. And I take one of these little seedlings. I'm just gonna drop it down in there and fill around it. That is really, this is the easiest culling I have ever done because I don't have to call anyone. But I will tell you, culling, you know, when I very first started doing the culling of the seedlings, it was kind of sad. It was kind of difficult. But after about 4 years now, it's not so hard anymore. There you go. So you can see its original seedling leaves, all of that. That's about how deep I would plant that. There we go. All right, so we just go ahead and do another one. These guys have been growing in such a wet media, so I'll probably try to keep them a little more on the wet side for a little while. But it's also really a good thing not, you know, to keep some of the original media around the roots on them. And the reason for that is because it gives those roots an easier time to acclimatize, you know, because they don't rinse them off or anything like that. Just keep them in the same media, and what will happen is they will just wander out and acclimatize very slowly and naturally on their own into the new media. Here we go. There's another one. I am just so fascinated with these seedlings. Really, just think those guys are so cool, and they're just going to take off and do amazing seedling things. Here we go. This guy's got a nice little, he's got a nice root ball on him. There we go. Fill around there. Now this is way more established than I thought they were, for sure. And I was just so surprised that there was only 3 seedlings in there. I would have thought that was a cluster of like 20 seedlings, but oh, it was just the 3. Surprise, surprise. But how fantastic is that? I'm so excited. Okay, so those are good. The only thing that is left for those is that obviously they need labels. So that is something definitely to not forget. Let's real quick cut these Monacantha seedlings out of here, and we can get those guys planted. Go. So these guys should be pretty easy just to kind of pull out there. There's one. You know, you just want to be real gentle. Oh, there, broken root there. And then there's the last one. So you can see how small these guys are in comparison. They're not really quite as well established. And you can just tease some of that media again off of there and try not to damage the roots too much. These guys don't have very deep roots yet. So there you go. So for those guys, we are going to pot them in here, and we're just going to pot them individually in their own, like that. There we go. Pretty simple. Last one, he's got kind of some deep roots, so you have to create kind of a larger hole for that one there. There we go. So it's just that easy for those guys. So let's open up the Halisca Starlight one that is self-pollination. There we go. We open this guy up, and he's cool because he's got a few of them in here. Let's work these guys out if we can. There we go. I watered these guys before I did this, and you should definitely water your seedlings before you cull them. The reason why is because their roots will become much more elastic and they will be less prone to breaking. So I feel like this is a really good example of, you know, the idea of culling. So the example that I'm showing here is you can see that I've got several seedlings. You can see this one is obviously the strongest of the seedlings. So this is the one that I will definitely be keeping, hands down. This one here also looks kind of strong and it's got new branching. It's got these 3 little branch growths. So that one I'll probably be keeping. I don't think I'm going to keep these. This one is obviously just really, really small. These 2, you know, he's got a little branched growth or whatever, but like I said, in all honesty, after you do this culling so many times, you realize you cannot keep them all. I mean, you just don't have that amount of space. And while some people will take the seedlings and stuff, it just, you know, there's a lot of them. So it just gets easier over time. I used to feel really, really, really bad about, you know, getting rid of them. And I mean, to a degree, you still kind of do. I just don't feel as bad as I used to. So those seedlings I'm not going to keep. I'm only going to keep these 2 very strong ones here. So these 2 very strong ones, again, I'm just going to kind of dig down in there, create a little hole, get him down in there, fill in around him. Such a nice mixture, so nice and aerated. What a pretty seedling that is. Such a pretty seedling. Oh my goodness. There we go. And I will definitely be carrying on. And once again, gotta make sure you have your labels in there. To save labels, sometimes I will go like this and I will label. And then whenever you see the next label, that's when the start goes down. And you just need to remember that the name facing is where you're doing that from. So there we go. I hope you've enjoyed this kind of interesting look at what it's like to have seedlings, you know, growing at different stages. Thank you for watching and happy cacti growing.